Hey, everybody. Welcome to our time together. I love the concept of habits that changed my life because quite literally, this changed my life. And I'm going to walk you through. I'd gone through life. I'd had a lot of crazy as a child, a lot of stuff in sports world, played in the NFL and all these interesting things. And then I got to a point where I lost my career in football. I tore my left shoulder. I still have a weird shoulder issue on the side. I have to have it replaced in about 10 years, by the way, which kind of sucks. But I had this thing where I came home and didn't know who I was. I was just like I'm not Anthony Trucks, the football player anymore. And if anybody in here could attest to a moment in time when you can look back and go, I was doing something for a long time, and all of a sudden, I couldn't do that thing anymore. Maybe you left the military. Maybe you left a sport. Maybe you left your career and went into a business. Maybe you stopped the business and sold it. Or maybe you went to a job from the business, right? Something changed. I believe the habits that we have, they are in existence. We all have some in some manner, but they may not be creating the life we want. So when I look at the habits to, install that change my life, typically they're going to be us coming out of a place of kind of being in a funk maybe, or we're in a place of just normalizing or accepting minimal joy in life or minimal achievement, we'll call it. So I came home, didn't know who I was, and I just kind of broke my life, to be honest. I was in a place where I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't a good father. Things fell apart. And I find myself in about 2015 really at the back end of a marriage that fell apart, and me and my ex-wife were at each other's throats. If you guys have exes and you have kids, you know what that's like. It is not a fun place to be. On top of that, my business was never really fully successful. I was always up and down. And every 2 weeks, I'm like, how do I pay rent for the facility and payroll? And then how do I pay rent for the facility and payroll and my own house? I couldn't get myself to be at a higher level. And on top of that, I wasn't in a place where I had great relationships. I was separate, but I was not liking to be alone. So I would have, to be honest, not proud of it. I had multiple women I would talk to, always transparent, but it was never this thing where it settled into being like a groove. And I woke up at one point and I realized I don't like this guy. Genuinely didn't like this guy. I was a man of faith. I'd fallen so far from my faith that my mom, who had passed previously to that moment, she wouldn't be proud of me as a man. My daughter, I would never want her to be with a man like me at that time. I wouldn't want my boys to emulate me and that kind of guy at that window. I wasn't good in relationship, and my God wouldn't let me into heaven acting the way I was. And so I stepped back and I go, something's got to adjust. I can't, if I'm going down the pathway, maybe you can attest, the path you're on right now, if you were to extrapolate that down, you might go, yeah, I don't want to end up in that place. And it may not be a horrible place. It may just not be the place that your potential could genuinely take you. And so the thought is well, how do we get to a place that's somewhere else? How do we shift that trajectory to go to a new place? And I realized I had to wake up and do things different than I was. And it was going to mean doing things that were really out of character for who I was in the moment. And that's going to be the hardest thing we climb. You're going to hear some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today. And you're going to immediately, your soul's going to go, that's not who I am. I don't do that kind of stuff. That's kind of weird, right? Your brain, your soul will go, that'd be weird for me to do. Good. 100% good. Because anything, if you think about it, that's out of character, it's not always bad. We have this perspective that out of character is a negative thing, when I believe out of character could also be out of character into a better character human, a better version of you, a more joyous, a more happy, more servant, whatever it is, higher level. So the idea is we're going to go through these areas. And I had this thing I did called Roots and Fruits. And the Roots and Fruits was developed for me from a space where it's I want to segment my life so I can focus on my life. Because if you don't have the ability to focus on certain areas, well, then what ends up happening is you're kind of sporadic. You do something, forget about this thing. I do this thing over here. Anybody had that happen? You want all these things to work on, but yeah, you're bouncing around. You're like, oh, I got to go do that. And so I akin it to if I'm in a room with a bunch of balloons that aren't helium filled and they're all falling to the ground. And I'm running around the room, hitting this balloon, and gotta hit this one, gotta hit this one. And you're rolling back and forth, freaking out, trying to hit balloons in the air. We don't want to do that. We want to spend some time putting it. Lisa says way too much, right? So here's how we do it. The roots, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you the fruits. Then we're going to go into them, and I'm going to walk you through some of the things that I did habitually or added to my life to improve these areas. And then I'm going to show you places you can put them in, right? Really how to put these in areas of morning, evening, month, and week routines. So here we go. The roots: faith, you write this down, family, friends, health, and emotional control. If you are a tree, which we all are, Those are the roots that keep you strong. So when the winds of life come blowing, you don't get uprooted. If you have good friendships, you have a good base of faith, you have a great family, you have great health, which your body's doing what it needs to do, and you have emotional control in heightened situations, you can withstand the craziness that we all experience. Because we all have days we wake up and go, this is not my life right now. This wasn't what I planned to happen today. What do I do with this, right? Now, on top of that, if I have the roots in place, if I'm in a space where it's great soil, great nutrients can come in, I can produce great fruit, right? So these roots, the deeper they are, the more fruit, which is going to be career, write this down, education, finances, escape, which is like taking trips and traveling and seeing the whole beautiful world we have, and then something I can just call purpose. The last one's be purpose. If my roots are in place, I can focus on producing great fruit. But if I have issues with my family or my friendships, it's hard to focus at work. It's hard to pay attention to the world and be educated. It's hard to make good money. It's hard to be able to be in a place of purpose or to even go take a trip without feeling funky. Because for me, to be honest, when I'm like traveling and doing my stuff, if me and my wife are fighting, I'm spun up. Can't even enjoy it, right? So the idea is, how do you get to a space really of having good roots and good fruits? So I'm going to dig into these, and I want you to kind of go along with me and write things down that may make sense of habits you can apply. I'm not going to say you put these in immediately, but I'm going to have you get some things to write down. So let's first start with family. So my family is comprised of me, my wife that I remarried after 3 years divorced. We have an amazing marriage. We are both imperfect. She gets under my skin, I get under hers, but we are dialed. And then we have my 3 kids. One's heading to college in about 2 weeks. I have twins that are interesting in and of themselves. They're completely opposites, which is good and bad. It's just the nature of humanity. And this is my family, right? And so I'm going to talk you through what I do. So for me, my son and I, my youngest son now, we have these routines that we go through in the morning. I get him up at 6:30. We go and take a walk. We come back and do a cold plunge in the morning for 2 minutes in 48-degree water. He's not a fan of this. We meditate for 10 minutes. He gets on with his day. That's time I spend with my son. My other daughter, which is his twin, in the evening, I train her with one of her friends. So we get into the gym, we spend time talking, working. I train her physically. I have a whole gym in my house. And then my son, our oldest son, we spent time traveling. He's the oldest. I've been around him for a long period of time. I've coached his teams. We've taken trips together. So I spend time. One thing I recommend that I started doing years ago was something called dad days. So I would also find time in the week to just spend an hour with each kid. We choose a place, their choice, and we go somewhere. And this literally gets worked into my weekly calendar. Like a weekly calendar says dad day. And I put it in. It's really simple. You don't even have to go anywhere. You could just go play a board game with them. Half the time, kids just want to have your undivided attention. So if you have some, choose a dad day, spend it with the kids. Now, my wife, I'm going to say we haven't done these as much recently, but we used to have a window of time we did date days. We just go out in the evening. I think because we're both home all the time now, we're always around each other. We're watching movies and TV shows together. We kind of get our solo time, we'll call it. But we had these things called date days. In the mix of all the stuff going on, we would just stop and go, hey, we're going to go take off on Friday to go get a meal somewhere, or just go walk somewhere, just do something together. And again, it goes into the calendar. It's a simple habit. Here's one thing we also do that I believe is a really good habit for family. Every night, we do something called good day, bad day. I heard people call it high-low buffalo, rose and thorn. I like none of those. I like mine. It's good day, bad day. Here's what you do. We sit at a table every night. It's a habit that gels the family. We sit at the table and go, hey, good day, bad day. What was the good part of your day? What was the bad part of your day? And we just go around a table, and that's what our conversation is. And that sparks new conversations. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes we get into, having conversations of how each person can be better. Like sometimes the bad part of my day is how one of the kids did something crazy, and we talk about it. It's not always the case. But the thing is, if we don't have these discussions, we can't gel as a family, because family and all humans that you may know, it's based on depth of conversation and length of time spent together. So if I'm with you for a while and I talk deep, we bond. So we do that as a family. We also, here's something I do for my habits. I do not schedule my weekends. I don't know if any of you have a spouse that is, we'll call it a little bit controlling in a good way, type A. My wife is like that. If it's not her idea, she don't want to do it. And I get that. We've learned each other over time. So my weekends, my habit is I don't schedule work. I don't. I just let her do her thing. I schedule nothing on the weekends. I step away and it's like, hey, where do you need me to go? I got my keys. I got my water. Let's go to work, right? It's a habit of that. And then also with my, we'll call it extended family, we do these monthly Zoom calls. My sister, who is like the gel since my mom passed away, she's out in Virginia. I got a brother in Germany. I got 2 other siblings here in California. And what we do is we just play these like trivia games on Zoom, but we schedule it.
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.